I want to move on to some detail that you provide in the book, and you are very articulate in communicating this verbally as well, is some detail about the PLO, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood. Give us some kind of a sense, because for the average American, you hear those monikers, but oftentimes you don't really understand what they represent or how they're interconnected.
Yeah, it's interesting. The PLO I was talking about before, so I'll start with them because they're the oldest. Actually, the Muslim Brotherhood is the oldest group, but I'll get to them in a minute. The PLO started in the 1950s, I believe, and it was the Palestine Liberation Organization, a secular group that was actually aligned with the Soviets, just as Anwar Sadat was aligned with the Soviets, because the Israelis were aligned with the United States. And in those days, this is the height of the Cold War and the binary of the Cold War, that you're either with us or with them. You're either on the Soviet side or on the American side. So the Israelis are on the American side, the Arabs are on the Soviet side. So the Palestine Liberation Organization started out as a secular, even Marxist organization dedicated to the destruction of Israel. And it made it very clear in its charter that it was not interested in diminishing Israel and establishing a Palestinian state that would live side by side with Israel, no two-state solution and all that. It was wanting to destroy Israel altogether. Renamed, as I explained before, the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1964, when the Palestinians were invented. And it became progressively more Islamic as time went on. So that nowadays, you've got Mahmoud Abbas, who's the successor of Yasser Arafat as the head of the PLO, and he, of course, is president of the Palestinian Authority. He speaks much more in terms of Islam and in terms of the right of the Islamic nation to this land than he does about the oppressors throwing off, the oppressed people, the Palestinians, throwing off the yoke of the oppressor, the Israelis. The rhetoric has shifted markedly in an Islamic direction, just as the whole Islamic world has become much less secular over the last century and much more religious. So that's one group. That's the lead group, actually, that controls the Palestinian Authority. And it is the oldest, most venerable group among the Palestinian so-called liberation organizations, and the one really from which all the others come to some degree, or to which they all are related in some degree. Some guy was originally in the PLO, and then he decides that he wants to be more radical and so on. The PLO are what I call slow jihadis. There's the slow jihad and the fast jihad. There are all kinds of different jihads, but this is one distinction that my colleague at Jihad Watch, Hugh Fitzgerald, has formulated, and I think it's very useful. The PLO is willing to negotiate with Israel, and so you see the Palestinian Authority made the Camp David. The Palestinian Authority made the Oslo Accords in the 90s and the Roadmap to Peace with George W. Bush in the 2000s, and they're willing to talk. But their goal is ultimately the same as that of the fast jihadis like Hamas. They want to destroy Israel altogether. Hamas was founded in the late 1980s, in 87, I believe it was, 87 or 88. And they also want to destroy Israel, but they were, from the beginning, a markedly Islamic group. As a matter of fact, there is an epigraph on the Hamas charter that says, Israel will arise and remain until Islam obliterates it. Israel will arise and will remain until Islam obliterates it. So Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas is an acronym for Islamic resistance movement in Arabic. It is dedicated to the destruction of Israel on Islamic grounds, that it is explicitly all about restoring what they see as the Islamic right to this land. Now, the PLO is really based on that also, ultimately. But as I said, they couched it in Marxist rhetoric at the beginning because they wanted the Soviet help. Now, the Hamas group says that it is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the Muslim Brotherhood for Gaza. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928. The caliphate, I said there was no caliph, and you have to have a caliph to declare offensive war. There were always caliphs in the Islamic world until 1924, when the secular Turkish government abolished the Ottoman Caliphate. The empire was already gone, but the caliph had remained as the nominal leader of the Islamic world and successor of Muhammad. But the caliphate was abolished in 1924. As a direct reaction to that, Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, started the Brotherhood in 1928 for the express purpose of reuniting the Islamic world, restoring the caliphate, and then resuming the jihad against the non-Muslim world. So Hamas says that it is the Muslim Brotherhood for Palestine, and it is dedicated to exactly that, destroying Israel, restoring Islamic rule in the region in service of the ultimate restoration of the caliphate. So you have Hamas criticizing the PLO, both on Islamic grounds, that the PLO is not Islamic enough, but also on tactical grounds that Hamas wants to go into Israel and do what it did on October 7th. They would do October 7th every day if they could, and just kill Israelis wholesale. The PLO is willing to sit down and talk. Hamas does not want to sit down and talk. They lately have been talking about truces, but that's also something that's allowed in Islam, because Islamic law stipulates if you're fighting an infidel and the infidel's winning, ask for a truce, gather your strength, fight again more effectively. That's what a truce is for. It's if you're losing, it's so that you can strengthen yourself and start to win again. So that's why Hamas calls for a ceasefire. But ultimately, it's not interested in talking, just wants to destroy Israel, and would do it if it could right away.
So it's always just a lull in the storm.
Yeah, a lull in the storm is exactly it. That's what you'd get. If there were a ceasefire today between Israel and Hamas, Hamas would start fighting again as soon as it could. And, you know, you had a Hamas official, I think it was Hamad, who said right after October 7th, it might have been on October 8th, if I recall correctly, that we're going to have another October 7th, we're going to have October 100th, we're going to have October 1,000,000th, we're going to just keep coming and carrying out massacres on that scale as long as it takes until Israel is completely destroyed.